Give it a second. Hello, everybody. Um, we're going to do another interview with you. Ibrahim, why don't you begin by introducing yourself?
Well, my greeting to everyone, to all the listeners. My name is Ibrahim Kazeroonis, and I have been working with Rob for many, many years. Uh, and I graduated from University of Denver, and I left School of Theology. And I taught for a short period, and I moved to Dearborn, Michigan. For a while, I was the Imam of the Islamic Center. Now I work as an independent, dealing with my own center. Recently, I was in Iraq and Iran, so I believe the gist of tonight's program centered around that visit. Rob.
Okay, and my name is Rob Prince, and I too was associated with the University of Denver Corbell School of International Studies, where I taught and where I originally met Ibrahim. I'm originally from New York City. I spent time in North Africa in the Peace Corps. I've been a college teacher most of my life, retired now. Ibrahim and I, for 13 years, were political commentators on a public radio station out of Boulder, Colorado, called KGNU. And we did a program called Hemispheres Middle East Dialogues during that time. Now we've moved on, and we do occasional interviews, mostly on what's going on in the Middle East. The reason being because at this point, what's going on in the Middle East is going to affect the entire world. So with that, as Ibrahim mentioned, he returned recently. Was it 6 weeks that you were gone?
Yeah, 6 weeks in Iran and around 2 weeks in Iraq. So approximately 2 months.
Okay, so almost 2 months between Iraq and Iran. Of course, during this time period where the tensions in the region are becoming so dangerous and so explosive that we're, in fact, concerned and worrying that the war is going to expand very, very soon. It's a high possibility. So this program isn't so much to talk about those particulars. What I was more interested in was what's going on the ground. What is it, Ibrahim, that you saw, what you felt? And so let's start off with the following question. All right. You recently were in Iraq and Iran and spent 2 months there. Can you tell us briefly about your family's relationship to both countries?
Well, originally my ancestors, Rob, as you know, came from Iran during the Ottoman Empire, to be precise, 1890, beginning of 1890s. And they immigrated from Iran to Iraq. And since then, my paternal side, they have all been in Iraq. And I was born there and spent most of my early theological studies in Iraq until the event turned in a nasty political way. And I had to run away from Iraq. My family naturally are divided between some part of it is in Iraq, but the ancestral part is still living in Iran. But my main concern for the trip was my late mother's, because I went there for her medical treatment. And but that gave me the opportunity to be able to travel around a little bit inside Iran and meet a number of different people and literally tiptoe around the unique political circumstance that gripped the country as I walked into it. And that was primarily as I walked in, Iran was gripped in and engrossed between the death of a late president,
Yes.
President Raisi, that heightened the security in the country. And naturally that led to huge amount of questioning and at the airport. What an American citizen or US citizen is coming to Iran at that particular time. So huge amount of question, 2-3 hours at the airport.
All right, and you've been there before, not that long ago, and you didn't experience this
Not
kind of
this
thing
length.
when you came to the
No,
airport.
not this length. I mean,
Yeah.
they would ask why you are here, and you would explain your circumstance. Where are you going? Well, I'm going to this place, that place. Do you have a place to live? Yes. These are the addresses of hotels, whatever it is. But this time, the tone of the questioning and the content was primarily focused on what do you know about the ex-president? When you claimed to be a religious scholar, what did you do in the United States as far as commemorating the ex-president's death? Do you have any idea why the ex-president died? I mean, these kind of questioning. Some of them were leading questions that, from a security purpose, to trip you to find out whether you are hiding anything. But that took a long process until they were satisfied that I really had nothing to do with any political game, and they let me in. That was, and by then, at the same time, Iran was gripped by the need to close this vacuum that has been created by the death of the old president, the late president, and the whole political process of electioneering started. While I was there, the current elected president was not yet clearly elected, but the process was going on.
Well, that's very interesting. Can you tell me, in terms of overall policy, will the new president's views and approach be similar to the last ones, or will there be some differences? The media here is suggesting that the new president is more open to working with the West. I'm not sure how accurate that is.
Well, let's start from the beginning. One of the problems that the Western press has, and the failure to understand Iran, it is due to the fact that no president in Iran, in Iranian politics, is the same or similar. There are common thread that runs through and holds all presidents together, and that is the absolute commitment to the ideal of the revolution and a clear understanding that the supreme authority, particularly in the area of foreign policy and military, is strictly reserved for the leader Ayatollah Khamenei. These two are fundamental principles that all presidents, right from the beginning up to now, they all have to agree upon. What minor differences that exist is what we call in economic or some national politics that they may differ in how to implement one policy or the other. But none of the presidents are the same. And if you would have listened to Pezeshkian, which is the current president in Iran, as he delivered the speech and asking the parliament yesterday, I believe, for agreeing and voting for his cabinet, he made it crystal clear that single most hated enemy to Iran is United States.
Wow.
So that sets his policy right clear from the beginning. So the idea of expecting Pezeshkian or anybody else in Iran to somehow work against the mood. By the way, I spend this time going around. I have been to Iran on a number of occasions, as you know. I have never seen Iranian population so resolute and staunchly anti-Western as I saw them this week. Every time I ask why, they pointed me towards Gaza and the double standard, etc., etc., and the Western support for Israeli atrocities, ethnic cleansing, etc. So this, I don't think, under the circumstance, any president or any authority in Iran would be able to go against this national interest or national consensus. And this national consensus agrees with the view of the grand leader of the Islamic Revolution, Ayatollah Khamenei.
All right. So when it comes to foreign policy, it's the supreme leader who really defines that policy, not so much the president. Is that a fair commentary?
It is close enough, Rob. It's the parameter, the broad schema of things is defined by the grand Ayatollah Khamenei, the grand parameters. It doesn't mean that the president does not have any authority when it comes to defining the foreign policy. But once it has been clearly established, for example, if Ayatollah Khamenei says no deal with the United States, I don't think any president, no matter how strongly supporting of the revolution, will dare to go against the direct dictate, or explicit or implicit, of the views of Ayatollah Khamenei. Rob, we have discussed this before.
Yes.
The West lost Iran many years ago when Ayatollah Khamenei and Raisi decided that it's hopeless and futile to work with the West, and they needed to go east.
Could you elaborate? Well, first of all, a related question, but I want to come back to this. The last time you were in Iran, there were these major demonstrations, and the impression that they tried to give was that the country was split and that the opposition was very powerful. Of course, they forgot to mention that the demonstrations against the regime were not as big as the demonstrations that came in support of the regime. But what you're saying now is that the country appears to be united, certainly when it comes to Gaza and their opposition. I don't know what word to use, trying to avoid the word hostility, but it just seems like that's what it's about, to U.S. policy in the Middle East. Is that fair enough? Is that a fair enough statement?
Yes, and I remember when I came back from that trip, my assessment and conclusion, and even what I had seen in Iran in different places, where on one or two occasions, the Western media, particularly the Persian language Western media such as BBC and others, they would report that in such a time, there were thousands of lorries coming out or to block roads. And by coincidence, I happened to be at the same time that they were claiming it, passing that area, and there was not even a single lorry or what we call major highway closure or anything else. When I presented it at the KGNU, because of their mindset, immediately they took a hostile position, as this was somehow I was paid by the regime not to tell the truth. But that was the reality. It doesn't mean, we have to understand that any regime has supporters and there are opponents to it.
Right, and has problems.
The fact that Pezeshkian was elected by about 52 or 53% of the population against Jalili, which some people say was the favorite, the darling of the military and the conservatives, clearly indicates that there are some agreement and disagreement within the Iranian population. But it doesn't mean that to the degree that the West is trying to present it, that the regime is shaky and one major uprising or demonstration or rallies by the Iranian population is going to see the back of the Islamic Revolution. Far from it.
All right. When you on these trips, you actually meet with a fair number of people, if I'm not mistaken. What I'm interested in is, the views, if you like, of I don't know how to put it, like ordinary Iranians, i.e., Iranians that are not part of the government. How do they see this current moment that's so charged with potential problems? And
well, it's an excellent question, Rob. I did.
We froze. Maybe we unfroze. Good. Very good. Are you with me now?
Hear me?
No, Ibrahim, it's still problematic.
Can you hear me now?
Not coming through. Isn't that strange?
Can you hear me?
Now I can. Yes. Okay. So continue.
Yeah,
Right.
I deliberately avoided a meeting with military or high official people. Certainly, I met with people who might have contact with them
Yes.
in their family or within the establishment. But ordinary people, whether within the theological domain or ordinary people. And when I said that I had never seen such a staunch resistance against the West, it was within the ordinary people, not the upper echelon. The upper echelon, naturally, they have their own mindset. But ordinary people, teachers, businessmen, or people that I could meet in coffee shop or tea houses or some other place or restaurants, for example. And these are the people that gave me the impression that the death of the late president created a unique opportunity to express themselves in the light of, as you said, the charged environment that existed. But they all pointed out no way to Uncle Sam, as somebody said, because of what is happening in Gaza. So they all were adamant that at this stage, no negotiation, no going back to the old style of trying to appease the West. And even with regard to the nuclear deal, huge number of people said, as far as we are concerned, it's dead and buried. We don't want to resurrect it or talk about it, anything else. We are moving forward with our own deals.
See, that's very interesting to me because among the things I've heard recently, granted it's on social media, but still, was that that the Biden administration was suggesting going back to the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, the Iran nuclear deal, if the Iranians did not respond militarily to the two assassinations which have just taken place. That seemed to me to be such a almost a silly prospect given the history of.
I would even go further than that, Rob. It's a dumb suggestion by Biden. What do you expect?
Right.
It's a dumb suggestion. As far as Iranians, the nuclear deal is buried, finished, done. They don't want to go back to it. They have moved so much forward from the deals that existed in 2015. For the American administration, what gave them this olive branch or some hope of a deal is the talk that Jawad Zarif might be part of the new
Right.
cabinet, the guy who graduated from the same school.
He graduated from Cornell, from the university where we were.
And he was part of the 2015, so that might give us a hope.
Okay.
Give us a hope by exerting pressure. Tonight I was listening to a program that some Iranian diplomat or ex-diplomat, it wasn't just, they did not mention the nuclear deal. They said that we received threat from United States that Israelis might use nuclear weapons.
Oh, yes. I wanted to ask you about that too.
Yes, right. And the Iranians responded, once we decide to attack, we are prepared for all eventualities. If they attack that way, we make the Israelis regret it.
All right, one related question before moving on to your impressions on Iraq is, we seem so close to a military confrontation right now that could go regional, as is well known. From where you're sitting, what could be done to avoid an escalation of regional war? Is there anything that could be done at this point, or really should we just accept the fact that a broader war is inevitable?
You see, Iranians are, how can I put it? They are stuck between, on the one hand, they want stability for the region that they live in, because it's only through stability that they can exercise their power, expand their military as well as their economic power in the region. And at the same time, they have come to the conclusion that the only bloc that holds the stability for the region are, number one, the presence of the United States in the region, and number two, the Israeli lack of interest for respect of international law and sovereignty of the regional countries. And the current Iranian regime, under the leadership, and the Ayatollah Khamenei has repeatedly said it, these two factors have to be confronted once and for all, because it's only through neutralizing Israel on the one hand and pushing the United States from the region that we can see peace and stability. So personally, my personal idea is that if they want this to happen, the United States has to fundamentally shift its approach when it comes to the Israeli policy, And number two, the Israelis have to fundamentally change their views with regard to the green light that they have from the United States to attack other countries. Gaza constitutes the key here. If Gaza reaches the solution that the Gazan people want, in the way they want, nothing to be imposed on them, then there is a possibility that this might lead to some kind of less hostility in the region and avoidance of conflict. On the other hand, Iran has always reserved the right under international law, once its sovereignty is violated, to respond. The April response was against that, and before it, the attack on Ain al-Assad, Iraq, U.S. bases in northern Iraq and other places. Iran has clearly established that it has the will, the power, and the audacity to respond.
All right, I guess.
If they don't, Rob, if they don't, there might be some other reasons that for the time being, they reserve the right to stay back to see how other external factors are going to play in producing the security and the safety and the stability that they are looking for. But if the political game doesn't work, they are prepared to go for military.
Yeah, I guess, for someone who has always looked for a negotiated settlement to the Israeli-Palestinian crisis, I guess as it's called here. After all these years, and I regret this, but it just seems to be a fact that given how this conflict has never been resolved through diplomacy. In fact, it's gotten worse, whether it's Camp David, whether it's Oslo. And unfortunately, it appears to me that the way this is going to be settled is on the battlefield, unfortunately, militarily. I'm not here to endorse that. That just is how it looks from where I'm sitting.
I agree with your conclusion that it has not been settled, but there is a reason why it has not been settled. The reason is that the solution comes from hegemonic power, either United States, the West, and Israelis, to impose on the Palestinian, rather than a just solution for the Palestinian. Right. Otherwise, the matter, Rob, you know it as well as I do. The matter is very simple. Go back to 1967 borders of West Bank and Gaza as an independent state for the Palestinian. U.S. is not prepared to accept it. Recently, the Israeli cabinet said no independent Palestinian state.
Clearly said no.
So, under the circumstance, you know where we are leading.
Okay, let's move on to Iraq. I was trying to do a little reading about Iraq um, in preparation for this discussion. But what is striking to me is we are now how many years? 21 years since the U.S.-led invasion, which overthrew Saddam Hussein. And if anything, the situation in Iraq remains incredibly chaotic. A country that was not able to renew itself as we were told it would, but just the opposite. That it's fallen into chaos, and it has been there with no signs of relief. Is before we talk about your own experience, is that an accurate assessment, or am I exaggerating?
No, right on, Rob, right on.
Yeah.
Because I spent the time going around, and I found it to be even more chaotic than 2 years ago or some years ago that I went to Iraq and I spent the time. Although last time, not this recent trip, the previous trip, I had the time to go with a group of, or at least influential people, to get into the center of Baghdad and go around and see things for myself. This time, what we call the telltale signs that I clearly was looking for change for the better in Iraq wasn't there. The situation in every department was even worse than before. Electricity, water, the government structure, economic circumstance, job inavailability, school, etc., etc., everything. And every time you talk to some people, they said, well, we are not free to decide for ourselves. There are policies being dictated to us. Can you imagine, after 21 or 22 years of so-called democracy, Iraqi pilots and Iraqi, what we call even civilian airlines, not alone, and military pilots, they are not allowed to fly all over Iraq unless the corridor is identified by United States border.
Wow. Yeah.
That shows how much democracy we have in Iraq.
Okay. I have been reading that there's growing opposition to the U.S. military presence in Iraq, and so much so that the Iraqi parliament is calling on the U.S. troops to leave the country. Once again, from here in Colorado, it's a little difficult to analyze that and to understand how serious that is. Is it serious?
Well, after the assassination of Qasem Soleimani, there was a majority, about 70 vote in parliament, majority for asking the Americans to leave the country. But America and the Iraqi government, deliberately, they put the Iraqi government into the loop of negotiation that has not produced, although minor adjustment as far as American presence in Iraq, but under the pretext of helping Iraq against terrorism, they remained in Iraq. The day before yesterday, I read an article that the Iraqi foreign minister is going to Washington, I believe in September, to negotiate a clear mandate and deadline for the American withdrawal. They say September 2025. American withdrawal next year, by next year, it has to happen from Iraqi territory, as well as Erbil, which is the northern Iraq, by 2026. Whether the Americans are prepared to honor this agreement or agree with it, that's a different story. But certainly, as a consequence of not honoring the previous agreement, recently, but one could say with the Gaza issue, attack on American forces in Iraq has increased in number and intensity.
Can you talk a little bit about who is it in Iraq that is targeting the U.S. bases at this point?
There are a number of resistant, what we call axis of resistance in Iraq, which are Hashd al-Shabi, Hezbollah Iraq, and the Jabhat al-Tahrir and others. There are a number of groups that they have come together as the axis of resistance in Iraq. And they are the one that primarily attack American bases and other foreign bases. But at the moment, there's only American bases. And even if there are French troops, French or British troops available or present, they are in the American bases.
How many bases, American bases, are there in Iraq right now? Do you know?
To be honest, nobody has the exact number, but they are spread all over Iraq.
Do we have any number of the number of American troops that are there? Is
they say 9,000. Some people say 4,000, but because the United States hides the true number by including a huge number of troops in a civilian work. So we don't know how many civilians are military working under the pretext of civilian contract.
All right. Well, Ibrahim, is there anything else? Go on.
As big as the biggest CIA network in the region, which operates from the U.S. Embassy in Baghdad.
Okay. Is there anything else you want to say about this current situation in Iraq, vis-a-vis what's going on in Gaza and the possibility of some kind of broader war emerging?
Well, strangely enough, Rob, the polarization that I saw in Iraq was similar to the staunch position of the Iranians vis-a-vis the Gaza issue. So despite the chaos that existed in Iraq and disagreement of Iraqi population regarding or vis-a-vis how to solve the problem, but when it came to support for Palestinian and support for Gaza, they were united and galvanized. So this is something that has become the running thread, so to speak, between the Iranian as well as the Iraqis, as well as the Syrians, as well as other and Yemenis and so on. So they are, and the more the Americans get involved into atrocities, or directly or indirectly, they talk about peace and then they send these weapons around, but the more hate and dislike is generated inside the Iraqi as well as Iranian communities against the United States, and the more adamant they become, similar to the conclusion that Iran has reached. This region will not see stability until Uncle Sam and its cronies are left and Israelis are put on a leash to control them when it comes to violating other people's sovereignty and international law.
Well, Ibrahim, this is precisely the kind of analysis and news that we don't get here in the United States. And so I appreciate
and I'll tell you why, Rob.
Comments that you want to make about your journey in terms of the environment.
Well, I tell you why you don't get it, because most of the analysts are armchair analysts. They never move out of their office.
That's true.
It's totally different when you go to the field and touch the soul and talk to people and see where they are coming from. But emotionally, I still am not out of it. I still living between some kind of denial and reality that unfortunately I lost my mother. That is something that it really
condolences on your mother's death.
Thank you very much.
Profound condolences. Okay, well, we're going to do some more programs given the current situation. Don't want to talk about it too much right now because we really don't know how it's going to play out. But how it's going to play out, we're pretty certain is going to happen in the not too distant future, and so we'll hold our fire, so to speak, or at least our academic intellectual fire.
Sure, because at the moment I'm not hopeful. The whole classic dictate from hegemonic state is being repeated even now in Doha and Cairo. Three governments, none of them. The Hamas is not present. The Gazan population are not present. And then Blinken the Egyptian foreign minister and the Qatari foreign minister trying to decide the fate of the negotiation for Hamas or everybody else.
Yeah,
And
formula for
this kind of policy has been strategy has been used before and failed.
Right. Okay. Yeah. A very difficult moment we're facing, but we will continue to give our take on this and hopefully, share some of our understandings and insights with our audience. And so, for now, Ibrahim, good night. Again,
Thank you very much, Rob.
And we'll talk to you very soon. Okay. All right. See you all. Goodbye.